And when you are standing in the octagon of a UFC fight on the White House lawn and you're asked if you have anything to say and you scream, Michelle Obama's a man, that as the clock has struck midnight. That's
you know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Joe Rogan had Tim Dillon on his show. This is the first time in a while, though. Tim Dillon's been a regular on there. That's kind of how he built his audience. He's one of the OG Rogan hangers-on and has built an audience talking about essentially right-wing politics, doing kind of a satirical take on it. He is funny. But some people credit him now with, criticizing the Trump administration, turning on them over war. However, I would say the satirical take that he takes kind of nerfs any effect that his commentary might have, given that he's talking about his own side. It hits better when it's something that he's opposing, but he's not really opposing the Trump administration. He's kind of satirizing it in some moments, which maybe is effective in changing some people's mind. I'm not really that sure. So here he is talking a little bit to Rogan about some of the dynamics behind like the tech industry. And this is one of the main things that gets people's attention about Rogan and the things that Tim Dillon says these days regarding Peter Thiel, etc. Rogan and Peter Thiel are friends. And Tim Dillon tells stories about being kind of creeped out by him, being invited to things by him. Rogan doesn't say that, but he's had him on the podcast before and kind of capes for this tech utopia type of mindset. And that's really finding its way into Joe Rogan's commentary. So here's them briefly touching base on that a little bit, and you can sort of see that Tim Dillon isn't quite sure what to make of Rogan's worldview on this.
I get the feeling when you see a lot of these tech guys start adopting Christianity.
How about Peter Thiel's like that whole Antichrist thing?
Yeah, he does
like,
that whole thing.
What is he doing? He gave a fucking lecture on the Antichrist.
Gives a bunch of lectures on the Antichrist. He's fascinated with it, and a lot of those guys are moving into this interesting area of this is God wants this. And it's all of these worlds existing together, where you have this world of people who are trying to build a God and the world of people who already believe in a God and trying to get all of those people in the same tent. That's interesting.
It is. Imagine if that's where God comes from. If this is a natural process where human beings and their curiosity and insatiable need for technological innovation.
But then what happens once we get God? Like let's say we bring this God in, then what happens?
Nirvana.
Nirvana?
Yeah, we all merge. It becomes perfect.
Interesting. So we all merge and that's perfect?
Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. We're all going to merge with the machine.
Interesting. Because people do believe that.
At one point in time, cavemen had to be looking at the wheel going, man, I see where this is going to go.
Right.
There's a lot of guesswork. I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible to know what these things are going to do when they become sentient. I don't think it's possible. If Elon's correct and there's something that's 1,000,000 times smarter than human beings, and somehow or another why would we let people govern? Why would we let people build that stupid fucking rail station in California that's cost how much money and it's produced what? How much track is done? Why would they let people do that when you could have AI do that?
But if something's 1,000,000,000 times smarter than human beings, it's going to go, we're not building a rail station for these fat fucks.
Obviously Rogan is joking with this whole thing about, it'll be fine, just go into the tech utopia, whatever. But that is how he talks a little bit. And while he's willing to say, why do we trust these people, etc., he's kind of the one that trusts them because his vision of AI is what Elon Musk said about it, which is that it's going to be, what did he say, 10 million times smarter than the smartest human. That's based on nothing. It's based on bullshit, empty promises that Elon Musk makes over and over again. Why? Because he wants capital investment and he wants contracts with the government and he has to make big promises and he needs people in the media that will kind of trot out those promises. So Rogan pretty much serves that purpose at this point. And he's willing to criticize the Peter Thiels of the world, etc., sort of criticize the Christianity thing. That's what Tim Dillon is getting into here. Why is Peter Thiel talking about the Antichrist, etc.? It's freaking people out. But that's kind of the extent of Rogan's criticism of that sort of thing at this point, is just like, man, that's really freaking people out when you do that. Man, that's kind of upsetting people when you shoot people in the streets or when you drop bombs on Iran, even though that's what you promised you weren't going to do. You're kind of disturbing people. You're harshing people's mellow when it comes to that. So Tim Dillon can be given credit for having a harsher, more biting critique than that. But ultimately, the thing that I point out about these guys over and over again is that their worldview isn't changing. And if anything, they're just trying to find a way to continue to justify the right-wing, supposedly populist worldview to people so that they can continue this conservative reactionary project. So in this next part, you can see Rogan's bias specifically, and this is consistently what he does, where he will acknowledge something bad that Trump does, something corrupt that Trump does, but then he kind of backs up and makes it a wider problem, making it impossible to talk about what Trump is doing. And Tim Dillon gets closer to real criticisms of the administration than Rogan does, who's pretty much completely wrapped up in the administration at this point. And also here, Rogan brings up Tim Dillon's comments about the UFC fight and the guy who said the thing about Michelle Obama. This is the first time, actually, this has been talked about on the show, I believe. So here's that.
I think what concerns people partially about this administration is some of the crypto stuff. I think people are concerned with some of the coins and some of the crypto.
Well, Melania coin's legit.
That one I love. But the rest, I worry. No, but I think it's a fair concern.
It is, because it's
a fair
legal.
concern.
It's
right.
legal, but it's like, should it be?
Is it?
Right?
Should it be?
Right.
Should it be? Should it be?
Like,
for sure.
I mean, there's some freedom to you being able to make your own coin and
Totally.
you back it with money, I guess. But it's also a way that you can launder money. And it's also a way you can pay people off for stuff.
And dupe people into spending their money. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of people...
I was listening to your take on the White House UFC card being the end of MAGA.
Yeah.
And that the moment when that guy said Michelle Obama's a man.
Yeah. Well, it's just the greatest thing for... If you're a deep, hardcore... And I don't even mean the America First principles. I just mean, like, you're along for the ride. You're here for the part. There's a lot of MAGA people that I'm friends with that are deep... They're not political. They're along for the part. They like to party. Right. They want fun. They're in Florida. It's 4 p.m. They're drunk. You know what I mean? Yes. And they're in for the fun. And
That's
it's
fun.
It. They have boat shows and regattas where like a bunch of boats will go out with Trump flags. When they're watching that UFC event in their house in St. Augustine or Tampa or fucking West Palm, whatever it is, and that guy stands up because Michelle Obama is a man. It's the culmination of things. Every cultural thing has a moment where it just explodes. And it's over after that. You know, it's like Hunter Thompson has that famous quote about it, where he was part of this thing. And then it just, we saw it happen with like celebrity culture. A lot of it, like that Imagine video during COVID was kind of the end of that. Like people are like, shut up. People just said, okay, enough of this. And I do think that every movement just gets to a point where you've done all you can do. You've done all you can do. And when you are standing in the octagon of a UFC fight on the White House lawn and you're asked if you have anything to say and you scream, Michelle Obama's a man, that is the clock has struck midnight. That's that. I mean, I don't know what else you could do.
That guy, Josh Hokett.
Yeah.
That's like, he's got a shtick. Like, he's got a character.
Yeah, and he says crazy stuff.
Well, they probably, in retrospect, if they wanted to avoid this, probably shouldn't have had him fight on the White House lawn.
Sure.
Because if he said that at the T-Mobile Arena or in Madison Square Garden, outrageous.
Sure.
All right, so Tim Dillon is talking about the end of MAGA here. This is what he was saying on his show the other day. This is, I guess, what he's workshopping at the moment, saying that this big UFC event was kind of the ultimate conclusion. It is the big payoff to the MAGA mindset. The saying whatever kind of racist, terrible things you want to say, saying it on the biggest platform in the world, kind of reveling in the ignorance and the insult of it all, let alone the racism, transphobia, etc. Just a celebration of closed-mindedness, right? And that is what both of these guys have benefited from to a certain extent, feeding that closed-mindedness, feeding people's willingness to clamp down on those closed-minded positions. Rogan actually does it in a very underhanded way by kind of fire hosing all these different colorful ideas at you and then coming to these very conservative conclusions, similar to how he's now circling the drain around Christianity and kind of considering being a Christian himself, talking about how he goes to church and talking about the Bible a lot these days. Someone that has explored all of these different ideas supposedly over the years on his show, and he's coming to this very conservative, very safe in the conservative movement type of worldview. And I think Tim Dillon isn't doing that, but instead what he's doing is he's charting a path forward for the reactionaries to continue to be able to speak to the narrative. Tim Dillon is always careful to mention things like the cost of living, the fact that people don't own home, general conditions, living conditions. And so this is the classic example of reactionaries and fascists being able to point to conditions that the average person is upset about. And this is true on immigration as well. Tim Dillon is consistent about this, but the reason the immigration narratives work for them is because they're pointing to things that people are concerned about in different parts of the country. And so the manifestation of their narrative and the hardening of that has come as a result of a lack of any left-wing narrative to emerge, also allowing them to characterize any left-wing approach to the border as being open borders, rather than a conversation about the fact that Republican policy has sabotaged the ability of the processing of people at the border to go smoothly. They get rid of immigration judges. They get rid of the staff that keeps things going, make sure people are represented, make sure people know the right paperwork that they need to have. These are things that Trump gutted the first time. And then he comes back around to power and he makes the system even worse the second time. And so as they kick the can down the road, eventually they're just going to be faced with these problems that they keep making worse for themselves. And so these guys are sitting here wondering what comes next, right? The MAGA movement is dead now. What comes next? The answer is an inclusive democratic socialist movement. The signs show that that Tea Party is happening in the Democratic Party. Democratic socialists are winning, mostly in New York, but also in places like Philadelphia, some places in the Midwest. We'll see what happens in Michigan. Not across the board, but in a lot of cases, Democratic socialists are winning, and they're unseating centrists in these more safe blue districts, which means that that Democratic socialist voice is going to have more space within the Democratic Party, within the caucus. Whatever happens with the next majority that comes in the House, there's going to be more Democratic socialists there, and there might even be more in the Senate. And so what that means is that people like this are going to be forced to actually address problems, and there's going to be pressure on those Democratic socialists to also address issues like immigration. And so I do think it's important to come ready to answer to that question. But also, I think the narrative is going to shift to issues of imperialism abroad, the failure of the conservative movement to address that, even though that is what it promised to address when faced with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. That was the whole point, right? Is that at least Trump's not going to get us into these imperialistic wars, and yet here we are. And so the only answer to this is more representation for people in the government, because right now the small interests, the capitalist interests, have too much representation. They have all the representation. And that's the critique that these guys, these right-wingers, can point to, but they can never actually diagnose, and they can never give you the solution to that problem, which is to claw back some of the power that the rich and the billionaires have. They refuse to do that. And here's an example of them talking about Bari Weiss now owning CBS, being more influential in media than she should be. Tim Dillon has criticized Bari Weiss a lot for her Zionism, her Zionist enforcement in the media, and yet fails to draw the connection between Bari Weiss's rise to power with the free press and what she's doing now. So here's that.
It says the story CBS intervened on was a report about the 2026 protests in Minnesota, and the falsehood CBS asked for was to describe protester Renee Good as driving her car toward the officer who killed her, which Pelley said contradicts video evidence of the event. That's correct. It seemed to me that the lady was trying to turn the car away from him, but it did brush up against the guy, which is enough for him to decide to kill her.
Well,
and, but it was not, she was trying to run him over.
No, and I think
But however, that guy had been dragged by a car very recently. Totally. So he's probably filled with PTSD. He almost fucking died. I think he got dragged like 300 yards rather.
I think it's fair to ask at this
300
point.
300 feet?
Yeah, but I think it's also fair to ask at this point, like, what is the media? Like, what is the media? Like, all due respect to Bari Weiss, but like, so it was a heavily inflated price for her blog that she sold and YouTube channel, whatever. There's clearly a political agenda to this. You have billionaires that own all of these companies, and we're asked to believe that like she's the most qualified for the job, even though she's never ran a newsroom. She didn't like work her way up the ranks. She's an op-ed columnist, an opinion writer, and stuff like that. Great. Right. She made a lot of sense. We said it before.
All right, so they're pointing to this example of Renee Nicole Good and how the free press shouldn't have ran with the narrative that she was driving her car at the ICE agent who shot her, because that wasn't true. And why would you step on the coverage of it to put that out when it wasn't true? That hurts your credibility. Well, there's an obvious answer to that question, which is that they know what the administration wants them to do. And that is what Bari Weiss's purpose is there. And so Tim Dillon is doing this scathing critique of Bari Weiss on this, and yet it's only connected to her reaction to anyone criticizing the Zionist narrative and the fact that she is stepping in favor of the administration. So that baffles them. The part where she's defending Israel makes more sense. Everybody understands this game. She's employed by Larry Ellison. We all know what they're trying to do with the media. But then when it comes to issues of Trump, why would somebody who's doing what Larry Ellison wants and enforcing the Zionist project also be the person who is perfectly aligned with the Trump administration's desires and what they want to put out there in the media? Why would that be? It's because the Trump administration is in line with those far right-wing Zionist billionaires like Larry Ellison who want to expand their wealth through the Israel Project, through owning every media company in America, as well as just consolidating power. And so when Tim Dillon says, well, she's right about a lot of things she said over the years, she came to prominence on the back of the same type of narratives that you put out there from the right-wing angle. And he's talking about how, you know, all this progressive stuff, all this woke stuff that you're shoving down people's throats is what creates the negative reaction to it. That's something he said at some point in this interview, something they've said 100 times. But no, the people like you and like Joe Rogan who over-focus on that, and like Bari Weiss, and who turn that into a prominent issue of the day, are the ones who allow the billionaires like Larry Ellison to get away with continuing to rob us. Whether you realize it or not, you are part of that same system because you are pointing to the same culture war slop. When at the end of the day, the reason this Zionism is kind of enforcing itself throughout the media, the reason so much is consolidating around that, and it seems like even governments are consolidating around the idea of censoring in favor of that, is because its connection to capital and how much control that has over the political system in multiple countries. And so until you start attacking the wealth that these billionaires have, you're not going to actually be opposing anything that they do. You can criticize what they do, and if you entertain them enough, like a court jester, they might even allow you to stick around and not get rid of your show outright like they're going to do with the socialists and the leftists who are actually causing problems for their agendas. So these guys can be shocking. They can say whatever they want about Michelle Obama or whoever else is the moving target that they're going to focus on when the current culture war stuff runs dry. But as long as the wealth of people like Larry Ellison and Elon Musk, who Rogan speaks very highly of here and everywhere else, politics are going to keep going in the same direction. And guys like this are just going to keep finding new scapegoats to point your attention towards because they don't want to be caught criticizing capitalism or capitalists, because that's a bad look for them.
I'm in the pocket, and they know they can't slow it, can't stop shit. How the game so cold, so toxic. Can't drop cause they're in somebody's pocket. For me that's not it.